question, how can quality leaders help their manual testers reach automation proficiency? Who wants to take the first question? Jason?
All right, great. So the first question, the first answer I would have to that would be a question is, why do we need to do that? And I know that goes counter to a lot of people, a lot of thoughts and theories in the industry of we have to have all automation, everything has to be automated all the time, right? So the first thing I would say is it doesn't always work. Moving somebody from a manual role to an automated role doesn't always work because they may not have the aptitude, they may not have the attitude, they may not have the willingness or the want to even move to that. The way I set up my organizations is I like to have a small amount of manual testers on each Scrum team along with automation as well. The way I see it working is the automation is there to focus mainly on regression scenarios, while the manual testers are there to look at features, do exploratory testing, things like that. So they work hand in hand. The manual testers then write the test cases, they identify automation scenarios, things that should be automated, and work hand in hand with the SDETs or the automation person in order to make that happen. So I think there's room for both. And that's the way I like to set up my organizations. And I think that, you know, we should expand our minds and not try to take these people and force them into a role that they don't necessarily want to be in. Something else I would say is make sure you have your organization set up to where people understand that they have a career path. They can be in either an individual contributor role, they can be in a leadership role, and have different paths for people who have different skill sets. For example, you don't have to go from a manual tester to an automated tester immediately. You can take an interim path. For example, I have what I call a QA engineer role. And that QA engineer role allows people who are quasi-technical, people that want to maybe do some database queries and do some testing and then go behind the scenes and update the database. They want to be able to understand APIs and do some understand the syntax associated with that and do some API testing. But they're not somebody that's going to sit down and be a hardcore coder. We're asking people who have been writing test cases and executing them in a manual fashion to become basically programmers. So it isn't necessarily something that we should force people into. So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Anybody else want to jump in?
I would love to, actually. So 2 points. The first one would be, are you also helping your developers learn how to test? Because why is it always testers have to learn how to develop, right? So I'd want to see the inverse of that too. How do you set up your developers to get good at testing? And then how you create that curriculum and how you create the organization, you can also help your testers pick up other skills too. The second point I wanted to make was automation engineering is a massive umbrella. There's a lot of things within it. And so saying that the only progression for a human-centric tester is to then go into functional automation engineering is really limiting, and I'm not a fan of that, because there's, in automation engineering, you have cloud engineering, you have machine learning, you have data science and analytics, you have SRE, there's all these other things you can go into, and that's not the only track also, right? We had a tester at Adobe who wanted to advocate accessibility, and so there was no position for accessibility test or anything like that, but we ended up making one because we saw the value in there. And so a developer plus her together ended up kind of leading the initiative for accessibility that we had there. So there's other paths too, and we don't have to just, pigeonhole people into a single funnel when there's other stuff too.
To answer that question on its face as it's initially asked, it's kind of odd, you wouldn't hire someone off the street and make them a programmer. You'd say, go get a computer science degree and take, 9 credits a semester for 4 semesters in a row, and then we can talk. So if we're trying to actually enable people to be successful with tooling who don't have a background in that, depending on your goal, depending on how much coverage you want to accomplish, I would say there are some new tools, some of the codeless automation tools that we've been saying these things don't work for 20 years are getting, like Testum or Subject 7, Selenium IDE, are getting to a point where for some definitions of some amount of coverage, someone without a traditional CS background could have some amount of success using those. And that's more successful than they would be if you just said go write code where they'd fall on their face. That's answering the question as it was asked fairly. Now, to do the double loop learning thing and push back a little bit, I will tell you, in 2004, 16 years ago, I went to Star East and I gave a presentation on test-driven development. And Lee Copeland, the program chair, patted me on the back and said, you know what, Matt, I think you're right. I think the day of the non-technical tester is over. It's 2021. Lee Copeland has retired. His days are over. And some of the non-technical testers are still here. Go figure. But if you want to be a non-technical tester, you better have some other secret sauce, such as deep product knowledge, subject matter expertise, incredible ability to maneuver in the environment, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I saw a lot of head nodding up here, guys. Great comments. Let's move to the next one. And this is a fun one. What do you believe is the difference between sales hype and the current reality of AI, ML in test automation tools today?
Starting with the fact that my company just bought a company that does AI low-code, no-code work. What I can say is that the only reason I was comfortable in signing off on that acquisition, not that my sign-off had value, but I got a vote. The only reason I was comfortable with signing off is because the cage that you put the robot in was very, very small. If you told me that we were going to buy or build, was that me? All right. Yeah. If you told me we were going to go buy or build a codeless, low-code, no-code, AI-driven ML solution, the truth is I evaluated 21 of them while I was doing my research, and the one we bought was literally the only one that I thought did the thing that it was supposed to do. I'm not going to go into it because this isn't here to pitch, but to me, the hype around replacing the human as the originator of the test case is ridiculous, and I wish we'd stop doing it. We keep doing it because it keeps attracting capital, it keeps attracting investors, and I feel like we snagged the only one that really has a good chance of getting it right. But to me, the magic of AI and ML should be applied to the other end of the testing, to the analysis of what's already happened inside your testing environment, correlating events, putting conclusions together, delivering information that's already there back to the human to help them draw conclusions and make better decisions. So to me, the hype is a little bit ridiculous, but it funds the reality, which is trying to apply this technology in the right direction. I'm not sure I hit the question right, but
No, that's great.
that's the way I thought.
I'm going to ask the next question and not close this question because I think they go together. The next question is, what do you believe AI will be? Where do you believe AI will be the most beneficial to quality domain over the next 1 to 3 years? And maybe somebody else or you want to speak to that?
I just want to reiterate the point. To me, where is after the test is executed, help me figure out what just happened, not before the test execution to try to replace the human mind. That's a losing proposition. So that's my opinion.
Totally agree. Anybody else? I want to hear some dissent if there is any.
No, I think that's right. But I also think that, it can be applied to, how do you say it, not just post-execution necessarily, but also in maybe identifying potential issues before they actually happen as well. So I think it can be applied in that area as well.
I'm going to deeper dive. How do you think that would work? Where would you put it? Where would you look? Before, like you were saying.
Well, I think it goes back to the correlation, right, that Marcos was just mentioning around what's already happened, and then you'll be able to do more predictive analytics, I guess you could say, right, on these tests being executed, what probably is going to happen on the outside as well. So.
Awesome.
Real quick, who's familiar with like GitHub Copilot and like Kite and stuff? Okay, essentially it's a tool that helps a developer augment and create code. And so once GitHub Copilot came out, a lot of developers are like, crap, my job's about to get automated away. And basically every tester in the world laughed a little bit. Now, GitHub Copilot is not there to replace the developer. It's literally meant to augment your workflow and how you do things. So I myself like to code in a very TDD format, and GitHub Copilot was great. I would define the specs I wanted, the rules I wanted, and then when I got to the refactor bit, it just generated the whole function for me, and I just hit tab and was like, sweet, ran the test, and sure enough, it did exactly what I wanted. So it's not, I think AI and ML, the part that gets scary is people keep saying replace, and that's the marketing happening when I see it way more as an augmentation tool where it helps get rid of some of these tedious tasks so then I can spend my time as a tester, as a critical thinker, as a holistic person. Shout out to Janet, that was an amazing presentation, by the way. It lets you do that. Let the machine handle other things that are smaller, like I've done all the TDD work, it's just going to help me finish that last bit. Right, but if I wanted the Copilot model to build the test for me, it would have no idea where to start. Like the tests were laughable, they were pretty dumb. But doing the TDD and then wanting the implementation, all of a sudden it helped quite a bit. One last bit is in productivity engineering, we use machine learning quite a bit because we want to help the developer be faster, more efficient, more productive. So one thing that we can use is we can actually see as the developer is writing code and submits a PR, the model can actually look at the code that they're doing and run some checks on it and say, I think there's actually potential bugs in here. And it'll actually generate a code snippet and say, I think this will fix the bug. That doesn't mean that it replaces their function, it's just a suggestion and says, have you considered these cases? Have you considered these fuzzy boundaries? And here's some suggestions to it. But you, the human, decide what you want to do with it. Right? So just some practical examples of machine learning before and after.
So real concrete log file analysis. How are our customers using our software? Do the tests that we write actually reflect how the customers are using our software? And can we predict any trends from that? And we could do that now. And we are not, by and large, doing that now. So why are we talking about this awesome, new, cool, fun, shiny stuff that, by the way, might not really work at all when we're not doing the stuff we can do now? So there you go. 1 to 3 years, do that if you're not doing it already. And Rachel needs to talk.
Yeah, not about automation.
Right,
Okay.
but next question.
All right. Next question. What have you found most useful in demonstrating the value statement of quality, either automated and or manual, to senior decision makers like the C-suite?
I guess I'll start. Oh, this is, okay. I guess I'll start. So my company has transparency basically throughout the entire management chain. And we have a lot of alerts that go on, and the testers, we monitor a lot of the alerts. We have a lot of that AI, I guess, for our monitoring, and we raise the flag very, very quickly. Usually, if our build verification tests fail like twice in a row, we raise the flag and get those fixed. And same with issues in production. If we get more than one random thing from the call center, one random bug report from the call center, we raise the flag. And so our value is in the monitoring, but then also we show our value, we ask a lot of questions in our Slack channels, and those are open to everyone. We have very few conversations that go on in private channels, and so people can see, our managers can see the value that we're adding at all times. And if you went to my talk this morning, you know how strongly I feel about asking the right questions at the right time. So they get to see a lot of that.
I feel like a few people heard me say this already, but if you want the C-level to hear anything you say, lead with risk. Lead with risk to the business. Don't talk about cost. Don't talk about how long this thing's going to do. Don't talk about possible delays. Don't talk about whatever. Talk about risk to the business from either an interruption of revenue to some sort of crippling defect or to a denigration of user experience. If you start with that conversation and you start by asking all of your testing related questions to yourself around what is the risk to the business if this thing goes wrong, you'll quickly start to develop a strong viewpoint around which tests you should do versus which tests you shouldn't do. The most successful test project I was ever involved in was one where we measured the sort of the mathematical computations that had to happen around the user analytics that were being thrown off by an e-commerce platform, which would determine lift and algorithm in the ranking of different offers that were on a page. And if we got that wrong, we would lose money by the second. And when I got involved to validate that these kinds of analytics were being thrown off incorrectly, CEO learned my name pretty quick because we were able to solve a lot of problems preemptively. Lead with risk and the C-level will hear you.
Great. All right. Ready to move on? Okay.
No, I'll chime in a little bit on that one too. So here at Equifax, right? I've only been here for about a year and some change, right? And the fact is it's been quite frequent that I've been dragged in front of the president of our alliance and been asked, so what happened? And the question always goes around, it goes back to, yes, it's a bug, so what was the business impact? That's the first thing they ask. He doesn't care about, what the solution was or anything else. What's the business impact, and how are we going to make sure that doesn't happen again? So, again, I think back to Marcus's point, it's really a risk play. If you can prove that you're reducing, the risk to the business, then I think you're covered.
Reduce risk. All right, now Jason.
Yeah, I'll try not to talk for 10 minutes this time, so.
You're fine. We got time.
So for me, walking into the organization I'm head of right now for QA, one of the issues I was having is that, we're talking about return on investment, but also value obviously is built into that, right? So getting there, QA really didn't have a voice. So I started just doing very simple things to show not only countering just basically what you were saying, when something does make it to production, escape defect, what the severity and the cost impact was to the business and things like that, but also showing what we caught before it went to production. That is obviously oftentimes not promoted at all upward, right? So every week on our leadership team slide, I list how many defects we found, anything that was, spectacular that, if it had made a production, how bad that could be and things like that. So just very simple things and showing the value that we bring is something I'm just trying to do now. I'm just trying to get to one as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I'm going to follow up. So on those simple things that we can do. So I don't know if everybody does this, but you capture leaked metrics, you capture caught metrics, you capture the cost of automation, you capture the speed gains of automation. What are some other things that you guys look for in helping to paint the picture that you have added value?
So I mentioned this at my session earlier today, but I was up against some other great speakers. So if you missed it, create a visualization of the entire product. It could be a mind map, it could be a spreadsheet, doesn't really matter, that is risk informed, so that would have some idea of coverage and risk. And one way to do that is red, yellow, green, or darker or lighter, maybe for coverage, or have little metrics by the side. You can do it with a mind map. And then you can have, if it's a mind map, it can point to a wiki page that then describes the feature and tells you how to operate it. For a lot of modern software development, we don't write specs anymore. We get cases in Jira. And what the software should do is an accumulation of cases in Jira, many of which conflict with each other. So you create this visualization, you put it on a screen somewhere, and people see it as they walk by and they start to create conversations around it. And then people want the link. And then tech support is using it for reference. And then product owners are using it for reference. Now you're leading product development at the whole dang company, and it's risk informed.
That's awesome. I saw part of your talk. All right. Anything else on quality value? Okay. If not, we'll move to the next one. This might be for you too, Rachel. What are some ideas on getting testers, quote unquote, to become more quality champions and evangelists, thinking more broadly about quality?
This one sounds like it's from my boss. Hi, Dwayne. So one thing that my company has done is move to calling us quality coaches. And actually, there's a quality coach on every team and not necessarily a tester on every team. And the quality coach is someone who leads by example, but also encourages other people to think about quality. So it's about making sure that that our stories are well defined and that we have found all of those fuzzy boundaries, that we've talked through all of the issues beforehand, that the developers are writing their unit tests and making sure that the unit tests are doing what they say they're doing, the integration tests are written, and that someone else is looking at code. But taking it from the tester having sole responsibility to the tester being the one who exhorts and encourages and gets people talking earlier in the process.
Go ahead and give me your question.
Do you believe unit testing can be used as integration testing?
Can unit testing be used as integration testing? Is that it? I guess once you do, I guess by definition it turns into an integration test, but I don't know, to me they're two different things, so.
Did you see my example earlier of how to explain a unit test? So, Andy, what's 5 plus 9? All right, he did it in his head. What time is it?
Let me check my phone.
See, that's an integration test. You have to check your phone when you find out what time it is. They're fundamentally different things. I mean, you can probably write the same code and then using Java object-oriented magic, you could inject at runtime the actual implementation of something else so you could use the same flow, but I don't like to put that kind of magic into my test code, that's personal opinion.
So I will say that if you want to write API tests in JUnit, which is a unit testing framework to test your APIs, no one is going to arrest you. So if you want to, you probably want to keep the test suite separate, but in terms of like, there's some overlapping of tools that we can leverage to have our stack be a little more simplifier. I think that's perfectly fine, if I understood the question correctly.
Those are awesome. Any others, or I can move to the next one. So this just came in, new question. What do you think the #1 issue facing the software QA world is currently, and what is the #1 trend in QA right now? So 2 questions. Biggest issue, hottest trend.
Biggest issue that I see every day is not testing the right thing. You know, I told the story at my talk. I had a team of offshore people who developed 300 test cases for something that it turns out less than 1% of our users cared about. Meanwhile, we weren't testing the other thing where 90% of our revenue came from. So not testing the right thing. What was the second part?
Biggest trend.
The biggest trend I see every day is people ignoring test failures and just moving on as though everything's fine. And it drives me up a wall.
It's dangerous.
So building off of the not testing the right thing, yeah. So for me, as we move more and more digital for phones and tablets and everything, the majority of the testing that a lot of organizations do is on a desktop. We write on a desktop, we code on a desktop, we execute automated tests on a desktop. But if you're like my company and my previous company, over 80% of the traffic that goes to our website is on some sort of mobile device because people are connected to their phones all the time. They're watching Facebook and that ad comes up for 1-800-CONTACTS or Burger King or whatever, and they click on it, and they interact with our website that way. So we do need to make sure that we're testing the correct thing, the right viewports, the different types of phones, operating systems, all of that type of thing.
So from the data that I have, which admittedly is rather limited, software testing is growing at a rate of around 10, 11, 12% a year, which means it's going to double every 6 or 7 years. General IT is growing much faster. And also the tenure of a typical tester isn't that long, which means on average, the typical tester has a couple years of experience. So we have to kind of relearn and reinvent the same lessons over and over again. And that's a little bit frustrating because you get some of the results that we've just been talking about when you have people that haven't really, it's like, I heard once an example of, it's like, our airplanes keep crashing. It's the weirdest thing. Well, should you maybe take a course or read a book on how to fly a plane? Why would I do that? It seems pretty simple. And now we're trying to combine that with something that traditionally takes a 4-year degree, computer science. And we're wondering why we're not super successful at it. It's just, it's a little disheartening, but if your role is to educate the community, for some of us it's an opportunity too. Yeah. So I'm not sure where that's going. That's just me thinking aloud.
What causes that 2-year tenure? What causes the 2-year tenure?
Well, the average tester has 2 years of experience right now. So they might have, that means half of them have 4 and half of them have 0, right? But I suppose a lot of people here could speculate on that. Should I keep talking?
Now let's hand off to Rachel. She had a comment here.
I actually wanted to talk about what I think the hottest trend is. This may be a year old, but I still think observability and monitoring in production are really hot and really important for testers. Abby Bangser has some fantastic material out there about observability, and I think that matters and will continue to matter.
We haven't even scratched the surface of that. We're just at the beginning. So yes, hopefully that's a trend that will continue.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is kind of what you said, where there's just developers, management, even testers are not really trained in proper testing. They kind of take on the role, they fall into it. I know I sure did. I was selling phones and then I landed a QA job. And so I had no formal training or anything, right? And so I moved into automation engineering just not because I didn't like testing at all. I still think I'm a tester, but it was because that's where just naturally my career progressed. At that company, there was no career ladder for testers. It was you were a tester and there was no QA2, there was no QA3. And so I think it was more so the organization's fault that almost organically moved me into a different direction. The developers there had no idea what testing was. Management there had no idea what testing was. They just had testers because they heard that term somewhere and they needed that. So I think what we're trying to do, I think a lot of us are trying to do, is trying to create platforms like a Ministry of Testing, like summits exactly like this, so that way we can reach a broader audience and say, here are things like Janet talked about, which was so amazing, and here's how you think about testing, here's the value you provide, here's what you should be doing. Anything that you weren't familiar with, test charters, test plans, unit testing versus integration versus like all these different terms and things. You don't have to be a developer to jump into this, but it's something that you should be aware of. And so if you're unfamiliar with these, go find them. There's so many resources online now, and we're doing a lot of it to help you get there, so then you stay in testing, because all of us here, I think, love testing, and that's why we're talking here. We want to share that with you. Exactly. We're super passionate about it, and we want you to be successful as well. I don't want to move away from testing. I love it, and I don't want people to have 2 years. That makes me so sad. Right. That makes me so sad. I want there to be people that have decades of experience, and that we're making the next generation of testers that don't have these dumb problems that we're facing, that make it a first-class discipline and make it something that the whole organization is actually doing. We shouldn't be talking about, here's how you transition to a high-quality culture. That should just be a thing. Things like accessibility suffer from that as well, where why aren't we thinking about accessibility? Why are we ignoring people in the world that don't have the same experience that I do, right? I'm blessed to have that, and so to ignore everyone else, I know I'm getting a little heated here, it's so frustrating that happens, you know? And so I just want to make sure, like, I think that's the problem, and all of us here, hopefully we can help each other to solve that, and let's keep open sourcing things, let's keep working in these communities to provide these resources, provide tools to help you get better, you know?
Exactly. That's why we're here. Yeah.
I have a thank you. That was awesome. And I'm going to get positive in a second, but let's look at testing. Let's be honest. Right? It's a job you kind of fall into. There's no special qualifications to have. Kind of beats working in a warehouse. It's seen as a stepping stone to maybe if you're really good, you could go and do other things. And there's no career ladder. And there's no particular training involved, and you're told how to do your job by someone who's never done the job before. And then we say, it's weird, this test is not very good. Oh, we don't pay them a lot of money either. So I got into testing because it was important, fun, and valuable. And about 10 years ago, people started to say, why aren't you coding? And I would say, I think I'm more valuable to the organization with what I do. And the good news, I think, is now I'm at a place where once we can explain it and they understand it, that no longer goes over like the lead balloon it used to. And I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you have something to add on to that, or we can talk for an hour on this one, and that's okay. We could. I want to just do a show of hands. How many of you fell into QA? Exactly. And what we wanted to do here with the conference and with these guys is to just provide some of that feedback to you, that this is it's a critical career, and it's one that shouldn't stop after 2 years. We have so much to learn. I've been learning for 25 years in this industry, and I hope to never stop learning. So,
if you stay in this career and you want to do stuff like this, it's just a matter of time before you will be able to. Everyone falls out. So.
I do want to plug something real quick. I was at AutoZone for 10 years. I built their quality practice there, and I got to work with University of Memphis a good bit. I know that nobody has a 4-year college degree in software testing. I know I don't, right?
I have met 2 doctors in software testing, one today.
That's awesome. So anyway, University of Memphis has a couple of different programs. You can get a minor in software testing there, which is really cool. And Jasbir Dhaliwal and Robin Poston have a program called the System Testing Excellence Program, STEP. And they invite people from all over the country to come there and get certified and come present at conferences very similar to this. So if you're wanting to get some more education on that, then I highly recommend that.
Next question, because that one we could go on for another hour. What unit test framework or solution do you recommend for SQL code? Anybody? Any SQL code unit testing?
I'm not generally favorable to. As a QA person, I think you only use SQL when you really have to. Like I don't know. I don't have a good answer, so I'll cut the tirade short.
I would presuppose that is speaking about programming language for SQL, PL SQL. So it's going to be Oracle or DB2. And you could easily write your own unit test framework for those. We could talk about it.
I heard someone say Perl, and I have PTSD now. So 1998, I was a Perl database developer, and actually I don't want to admit how much I loved it and how sad I was that the language died, but good times.
You could use test more in Perl to produce test anything protocol output, and then to hit your PL SQL if you really wanted to. That would work. Talk to me after.
Are there any other questions in here in the room that you'd like to ask?
How do we get our management teams to focus on iOS testing? Because it's not the primary avenue now, but it's soon going to be. Somebody in your organization can prove that using numbers and analytics, and that will fund the project. It should fund the project, otherwise I don't understand what's going on.
Does he mean writing test automation in iOS?
I mean that iOS isn't being tested as completely as.
Well, I would just tell your boss that and say, look, can you just write me an email that says you know it's not being tested well and that's okay, and when it breaks, I'm not responsible, you are.
I would frame it in terms of risk before the ultimatum.
Thank you.
I would.
We appreciate that.
I would try the risk-based approach first, and then the ultimatum. The ultimatum is a higher risk to your career.
Well, what I'm trying to get at here is you want to reach their emotional center. The first keynote was really good at pointing out that people often make decisions based on emotion. So you want that to be honest and not deceptive and not manipulative and not, but to get them to figure out, oh, this could break. That would be bad, and I am the one saying that don't worry about it, but really they need to worry about it. You get them to send that mixed message. It's like, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work.
When you say it could be bad, quantify how bad. That's the thing that I would try to do is at Retail Me Not, my previous company, we had a script that would tell us on a trailing 30-day basis exactly how much money every version of every browser on every platform made us. So I could tell you that Opera version 1.2 made us 50 cents in the month of September, therefore we are not going to devote any resources towards it. But iOS Safari version 12.0, that brought us X 10,000s of dollars, so focus on it. To me, you quantify the impact, identify the risk, then ask for the disclaimer.
That's awesome. Is it worth having a discussion about how you got to those numbers?
Business intelligence got to those numbers. I did not. I didn't do that. Sorry. Yeah. Right. How do you feel about something? I feel like so a little bit depends on your vertical, but if you're in e-commerce or banking or potentially video games, someone in your company knows. Make friends with that person. It's possible that in medical or someplace where they don't necessarily track user experience that you're not going to have some of that data around usage, but somebody's going to have that, especially if you're e-commerce or anywhere near something where platform diversity matters and they care about that. Somebody knows it. Make friends with that person. Become the hero.
If you're asked how do you feel, it means that the person asking doesn't have the tools to come up with the measurements. So you provide the measurements and you can say, well, we've gotten to this level of coverage, and out of the past 10 releases, when we've only had this level of coverage, 6 of the times there was a bug this big. What do you think? How do you feel? Suddenly they have the information they need to make the decision, and they'll make the decision. And then if there's a problem, they'll take some responsibility for their role in that breakdown. Instead of, well, Joe said he felt pretty good. Joe said he felt pretty good is not good.
This has been an incredible Q&A session, and I want to thank everybody who was here on the panel. You guys did a fantastic job. Is there anything you want to share before we applaud you out?
Marvel.
You want to talk about who's better? No.
Can we get a round of applause for Xpanxion for organizing this thing?
Thank you, guys.
You know, if you were a little bit skeptical at the free conference with the free food and you were expecting the hard sales pitch, that's natural. And I'm really grateful, both as a speaker, as an attendee. I think you put the right people together to talk about the right things at the right time. So thank you.
You're here.
Thank you, guys. I want to thank you guys. Give these guys a big round.